Dr. Jaishankar, breaking with tradition. Maybe I can this time start with you. And, since last year, since one year ago when we met here, we have seen that the wars have continued unabated. We have seen climate shocks and natural disasters occur frequently. Great power rivalries with new dimensions exist. What have we learned in the last 1 year? What has India learned about both power and vulnerability? And how is it shaping Indian foreign policy today?
I think a year ago, certainly a few months ago, it was very clear that the world was moving towards much greater unpredictability, volatility, uncertainty. Use whichever word you prefer. And here's the problem. When you predict something like that, people say, okay, so you predict what that means. Now, by very definition of unpredictability, you don't know what you're heading towards. Mm-hmm. It's not an extrapolation of what has been there in the past. Clearly it's disruptive. But again, the human mind, like, for example, people felt in unpredictability that it'll be a variant, for example, of somebody's second, first term would be different, first term, and then what happens. But what we are seeing is terms are different, times are different, a few months make a difference, a few weeks make a difference, a few tweets make a difference. So actually, it's really quite a, I would say, an experience for the world to go through this level of policy changes, of practical impact of that. And also the fact that so much of it is done so publicly, that it's played out in the full glare of the spotlight. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is, if you look, I'm talking, the last 3-4 years, we began out by worrying about our supply chains and our sources of production, and said, okay, when we said, let's de-risk the world, let us hedge against uncertainty, that meant having more production centers, having more supply chains, more resilient, more redundant supply chains. But now we also have to protect ourselves against the uncertainty of market access. Mm-hmm. So, you worry about over-dependence on markets just as you worried on over-dependence on suppliers or over-dependence on connectivity. So you could say, in a sense, almost the entire economic chain has become far more riskier or far more difficult really to assume in many ways. So I would say today the central proposition probably in diplomacy, in international relations is how do you de-risk, how do you hedge, how do you become more resilient, how do you safeguard yourself against unforeseen contingencies, which again I emphasize by definition are unforeseen, and really sort of build policy and build in a sense plans around that, and that's a very big challenge for the entire world.
And since, and I'm going to turn to the secretary from Mexico, but before, just as a lead-in question to the question to you, I saw on Twitter that you had met a group of Global South countries recently, yesterday in fact, and
today.
And you've been discussing, of course, the imperatives and collaborative methods on the days ahead. We talk about the South-South agenda, India, Mexico, Brazil, and other large economies in the global South. They talk about working together, partnering together, finding solutions together. Can you scale up to substitute for the missing north in many of these projects?
I'm not sure, Samir, that I would accept that binary. By the way, among the people I met were all my European counterparts as well. So I think it's too simplistic to put it put North in a basket and South in a basket. And there are some countries which fit neither. So it's a much more complicated, much more nuanced world. I think many of the concerns, for example, which I articulated are also concerns which are shared in Europe. I mean, I certainly heard that from our European colleagues. So what is happening, that's why I would, in a way, say the model, we've had an accelerated move into a multipolar world. Okay. A multipolar world where actually the most important poles of the world are today driving multipolarity, not diluting it. So many of these concerns, the search for new partners, more partners, bigger partners, more business, more options, it's not something which is a global South concern alone or an Indian concern alone. I think different parts of the world share it. I certainly heard it in Europe. Their interest today in moving forward with India was very palpable, and by the way, is very reciprocated by us. But it also applies, as you say, to the global South. I think a large part of our discussions are that there are many things we can do between ourselves. Maybe we have not explored that as seriously and efficiently as we should. And we could be looking at it. In fact, this is exactly what the minister and I were discussing before this panel started, between India and Mexico. So I can imagine, look, globalization won't stop. Doing business with each other won't stop. It's just different lines of different intensity and different values will now get re-engineered because of these changes. And it's that re-engineering process that we are actually going to see over a period of time.
Secretary, brings me very nicely to you. Mexico, in some sense, part of the global South at one dimension, but also has a very privileged space with the North in terms of your trading relationships. How do you think that your unique position actually might really be part of the solution of what unfolds, and how can Mexico contribute to solving this puzzle?
Well, yes. First of all, let me say that I fully agree with what Minister Jaishankar has just said. You cannot put the North in one basket and the South in the other. We've been in the middle since I can remember. So that actually has never really existed. And these days, I think it's even more clear because of what you were saying. No? And yes, Mexico is in a unique geopolitical situation because we are very much integrated to the North American market, which we believe, by the way, that the free trade between the three countries of North America has been a fantastic idea since it was first launched as the first free trade agreement almost 30 years now. And because it's proven that within the region, we are actually one of the most dynamic and powerful markets in the world. So it has had tremendous benefits for the three countries. So we're very much in favor of continuing that. But on the other hand, yes, we're also part of the global South, and we've always been there, and we want to be much more active now, because what has changed really imposes the necessity to rethink many of the things we were doing in the past. They will not longer work as they were working. We've seen that now. Now, the challenge is, how can then we have the global South, first of all, to become more interactive within our own dynamics, but at the same time become much more interactive with the North. And I think the game is going to go much more by regions than by countries. And I think this is a new dimension. And again, there we have the experience of the North American region. And finally, I would say that the other area where I think we need new creativity is on international development cooperation. And we have some examples that, even though in low scale, have been very successful. Let me just very briefly mention two of them. One has been named Seeding Lives with Sembrando Vida, which is a program that was launched, not this government, but the previous government of Mexico. And the idea was boosting productivity and diversifying crops and strengthening economic independence and fostering community cohesion in poor communities. And we launched this program with, at the beginning with El Salvador and Honduras, and then we included Cuba and Belize in our region. And again, it has been already evaluated by some international independent agencies, and it's working. It's relatively simple, and the idea is to really give these communities an opportunity to work in a more cooperative way than they had been doing in the past. And the other program has been focused and dedicated to youth, and it's called Building Futures for the Youth, Jóvenes Construyendo el Futuro. And again, even though the scale is low, it's being within our neighborhood, in the southern neighborhood. It's a good example of south-to-south cooperation with a different perspective of having a regional approach, very much focused on specific goals, working with the same methodology, and trying to get some funding to make them advance. So I think basically what we need is really, and I was very interested, by the way, by listening to the Minister of Information Technology, because I think we're going to need artificial intelligence in this new creativity to help us sort out some of the questions we haven't been able to solve to this point. But there is going to be a huge new interaction between trade, aid, and new technologies. No question about it. It's very timely, this intervention as well.
Let me turn to Mr. Sulayem. You heard a little bit about connectivity and the new routes and new pipelines being engineered, both in the soft sense and the hard sense. There is an assumption that because trade is more politicized today, the world is more polarized today, there is less trade today. Numbers actually demonstrate that that's not necessarily true. So how do you, at the helm of one of the largest connectivity companies in the world, see this moment unfold? And, how are you assessing the future?
The trade is very resilient. The only problem we have is with the supply chain, which is always affected, like what happened in the Red Sea and other areas. So definitely new routes are very important. So for example, the IMEC is very important concept of India, Middle East, and Europe. Today, we take cargo, for example, from India to Warsaw within 10 days through Iran by road. So it is sea, and then the port, and then the rail, all the way to there. So the south-south and the north-south is very effective. To take something to the Black Sea, for example, it will take a long time through the Red Sea. So these corridors are very important for us. And this is the advantage we see where we can manage. We never thought that we can take by road, but today we can go even from Afghanistan, China, Afghanistan, all the way to Europe, because China doesn't want to go through a sanctioned country. So they go through that route. And I feel the worry is more in the media. They are very excited about these things. But when it comes to us, look, the numbers tell us different. In our business, we saw growth in the first 6 months by 15%. Okay, India and UAE, because of bilateral trade, we expect trade to be $100 billion this year. So one way, I believe, to avoid all these surprises is the bilateral trade agreement. They are very essential. And I'm very proud that it didn't take a long time to do it with India, and we see the benefits today, where all the obstacles have been removed. You can't have an agreement with everybody and satisfy everybody's needs. But two countries together, they can come with something that benefits both.
So I think that's an important point, that we are actually now promoting bilateral trade arrangements rather than a more global architecture? And I'll come back to both the ministers to respond to that point. But I have one more question for you.
Yes.
You mentioned South-South.
Yes.
South-South is underserved. If South-South is going to account for 60% of the growth today and maybe 80% in the coming decade of all growth, global growth, how are investments going to flow to these regions, which are the dynamos of economic activity now? And who is going to fund it and finance it?
Listen, the roots are existing. Iran invested the last 30 years in rails. Today, CIS countries, they are $1.5 trillion of trade. In the past, you can't access them. Today, we created routes to access them. So that's very important. Digitalization is very important also, where we all have to speak the same language. That's very important. Okay. Another thing which is interesting is we noticed that all the air cargo that goes to Africa from the Far East goes all the way to Europe. And from Europe it goes. I'm talking about not the commercial cargo, it is the charter cargo. And that is like going in a triangle. So we are promoting South-South, meaning Far East, Dubai, Addis Ababa, Ghana, and Latin America. It is faster. We did a consignment from India. It saved 14 days, garment to Brazil, by using this route when we introduced it. Okay, and I don't know, like $14,000 of saving. So we have to come up with the new ways. We cannot just rely on the old ways. This is what everybody is doing. And with AI today, you can predict faster, you can add value, and you can save, both in cost and in time. And today, I tell you, for many of the exporters, it's not a matter of how much it costs. It's a matter of whether it arrives or not. I mean, we are faced today in a situation when you go to buy a car, we used to go and buy a car and drive it out. Today, you have to order a car. Even from China, it takes 6 months to order. So people are more worried about how fast you can deliver. And that's why we established many logistic parks around the world. In CIS country, in Uzbekistan, we're building a big one. In Kazakhstan, we have one. We have a big logistic park in Hong Kong. We have in China. We have in Japan. These are that allow us to really overcome these surprises. Because today, even the Far East, something interesting is that, look at Singapore, Indonesia and all these countries. They cannot produce enough for their own consumption. The market is big. Indonesia is like 300 million. Okay, so more production facility had to be in India, where we are developing now. And India today is close to Africa, very close. You know, nothing can come from Far East faster than from India. So I am really very passionate about how much we can do. We're developing industrial parks today in Gujarat, in Kandla, where we will, once the port ready, we're going to have production facilities so that you can supply huge markets in Africa.
Leslie, let me turn to you. Look, there was a Western consensus that being a development partner to the countries that were emerging and developing was strategically good for them. It was not just altruism, but it was also strategically important to be a partner to countries as they were emerging in their development journeys. Do you believe that the developed world has now changed its mind, and it no longer needs to be or wants to be a partner to many of the countries that are seeking and aspiring for better lives? And are they really of the view that this now can be delegated to other countries, for example, Beijing, to do?
It's a big question. So first of all, I have to say I went from being puzzled and then depressed as we began with Dr. S. Jaishankar, who I have tremendous respect for, all the way to yourself, where I felt a bit of optimism. But I guess to answer your question directly, I think it's not a monolith, the developed world, in the same way that the so-called global South is not a monolith, nor is the developed world. It's not only not a monolith between European countries and Japan, Korea, name your countries in the United States. It's not a monolith within the United States. And let me start by saying that I just asked one of my colleagues, I'm now in Chicago at the Chicago Council for Global Affairs, and I asked one of my colleagues, where is the data on American public opinion towards foreign assistance? And 2/3 of Americans are not happy with cuts to foreign aid. and that includes around half of Republicans, which is higher than you would imagine if you were listening to the media or some of the headlines. So first of all, you've got to separate the public from national leaders, and particularly from the current U.S. administration, which has a very singular view, which isn't even representative of a number of people in its own parties. Secondly, I would say some of the reasons that are, driving the cuts that we've seen are a legitimate reaction. I don't think the cuts are the right way to go, but it's a reaction to a legitimate set of grievances that we know exist because there are profound distributional problems within the developed countries, and most especially the United States, that are nothing to do with the global South, primarily the fault of policies that were taken by those countries' own leaders, certainly in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis. And we all in this room know the story, how that has unfolded. And the current policies, tax cuts, deregulation, attacking some benefits that are critical to low-income Americans, don't help resolve that problem. And so what we're seeing now is a sort of grabbing for where can we get revenue, tariffs as revenue, foreign aid cuts as revenue, you name it, revenue that needs to be generated because the governments aren't pursuing policies that are productive for the people that they claim to represent, which are many working class and low income Americans. So there's legitimate grievance. It has not translated into certainly Americans not wanting to be involved in the development challenges and solving them in a productive way. But it has led to a series of very pernicious effects. And so when I listened initially when I was listening to the kind of comments about disruption and uncertainty, I think the media is right on this. I think it's been phenomenally disruptive. It's been creating mass uncertainty for the rest of the world. It's also been creating a huge amount of uncertainty within the United States. I sat and listened to two members of Congress from Illinois, one Republican from a rural district, one Democrat. And the Republican member of Congress said on the record, how much pain can my people take? He was, of course, referring to farmers. The soybeans are very much on the minds, obviously, of many people in the middle of the United States. And he gave a nod to, okay, yes, there are bilateral trade deficits, et cetera. But this needs to be resolved quickly. So the pain is being felt across the developing world. It's being felt within significant parts of the United States. So I guess bottom line is, I think a lot of Americans would like to be a solution, a productive solution to the problem of development. There isn't a highly concentrated, well-mobilized constituency for that. There's a lot of diffuse American interests in development. And they also don't know what the basic facts are.
So let me ask you the next question. The US is going to be the house to the next year of G20, right? And you've been part of the Indian G20 story. You've attended a few in other parts of the world as well. We had 3 or 4 developing countries house the G20. Is G20 going to be dramatically different next year? Does the story get a new twist when it reaches?
I mean, I don't think we know the answer to that question. Obviously, the Biden administration pushed very, very hard to get the G20 leadership against the interests or will of China, as I understand it. The Trump administration, as we know, has not been a big fan of the G20, certainly not in the current round for the reasons that everyone in this room knows well. I think that India provides a phenomenal example, a case study of a case that could be made to President Trump of why it would be very beneficial to the U.S. to lead the G20, to take it very seriously, to use it to build a domestic constituency for America's first leadership on the global stage. I think the case could be made. It could be delivered very concretely. I don't see that happening yet. But I think that if President Trump suddenly sees that it's not about going to South Africa or going somewhere else, it's about hosting with a lot of fanfare and setting an agenda, ideally, cooperatively that, that there is some prospect for even a president who doesn't, like multilateralism and doesn't like to kind of work with others in that sort of way. I think that one could make the case. I'd certainly like to be part of the effort to make the case. I think it would be tragic loss to lose the momentum of the last 4 years. And let's be realistic. The last 4 years have been very difficult because, the elephant in the room of geopolitics in the Middle East, between Russia and Ukraine, the global impacts of all of that have clearly gotten in the way of the G20 being, meeting the ambitions of what people have wanted it, wished it to be. Still, there has been tremendous momentum, and it's come out of the developing world.
Look, if you were to talk to some of your partners at the G20, I'm just giving an advice. Maybe we could get the White House ballroom ready in time for the G20 summit. But that's just an aside. Now, let me just, we are really running out of time. I'm going to ask you just one question each, last round. And it's, it's not my fault. It's New York traffic that we all started late. But look, only one question each. And I want to focus on technology because that's something that we are really focusing on. Mexico has a unique challenge, opportunity, as well as a policy proposition where it needs to now marry the age of AI to its manufacturing prowess, create a value chain in this digital age, which continues to have Mexico at its core center and an important part. India, of course, has to continue its journey of lifting billions and millions, and a report suggests that 80% of all AI gains will go to the OECD countries and China. And literally everyone else will be sharing the rest of the divides if we don't take bold actions now. So there's a technology opportunity, but there is also clearly a leadership question here on how can we create a DPI equivalent of the AI world. Leslie, I'm going to turn to you finally on how do American big tech companies see the global south, or are they happy with the American market? I think Secretary Krishnan said this morning that India could easily become the world's largest use case of AI. So while you could have the development of AI in different parts of the world, we could be the largest consumers of AI, and we could actually use it for different sectors. And of course, Mr. Suleiman, I'm going to ask you, connectivity, trade, logistics, and connecting the world in the age of AI. How do we see this? This is one last question to all of you, a technology perspective, but please take this opportunity also to respond to anything else you've heard on the panel. I saw you noting down a few points there, so please do come to that. But let me start with you, sir.
Well, first of all, let me tell you that I think Mexico is a very lucky country these days, because, but I want to tell you why. Because we have a fantastic woman scientist leading our country. And to be a woman and to be a scientist is made a big difference. So I want to share a little bit of, because it leads me to technology. Of course, immediately some of the priorities were very much technologically oriented by a scientist leading the country. So immediately we have launched in 1 year a national artificial intelligence laboratory, a national semiconductor design center, a digital transformation telecommunication agency, which, by the way, all these developments are part of our renewed partnership with India, and that is going to create a new way to link South-to-South collaboration. So, it's in North America, it will not only be Silicon Valley. This is what I'm saying. We are ready to compete technologically. We have the human resources, but overall, we have the political will and the conviction and the determination that we need to move forward on that direction under strong leadership that has a popular support, international trust, as well respected, and we're open and willing to make our own plans, of course, considering the all complexities that Mr. Jaishankar has been telling us about, and not predictable. But yes, I think if countries create their own plans based on their own analysis of what is going on, and we're able to come up with the right answers, And again, let me just, the conception of international cooperation for development needs to be, again, brought to the center of the South to South and North-South collaboration. So I think we're ready to meet the challenges, and hopefully we'll partner with all of you.
Minister, but I can confirm to you, Mexico is not a low-key country. Dr. Jaishankar.
Samir, I would say, look, let me pick up. What do you do in this very turbulent atmosphere? I think particularly for large countries, it is important to build capacities, to be more self-reliant. That is very much the focus today in India. And because you said, look at it from a perspective of technology, I think in many ways, Mr. Krishnan speaking before us gave some of the answers. And we speak of multipolarity as though it's something that will happen. You have to build multipolarity. And you build multipolarity by building national capacities. And when you build national capacities and have national experiences, some of it is transposable to other people who may relate to it. So, for example, if you take DPI, digital public infrastructure, there are many other societies who find the Indian model of DPI, frankly, far more absorbable and relevant and transposable than a European model or a American model of how to run a more digital life. Now, it can be big things, it can be little things. What we have seen, because you spoke again earlier about South-South cooperation, many things we've done in India. If you have something like a drinking water mission, or you have taking electricity to every home, each one of these efforts actually has scaled up capacities in India, has created businesses and companies and people in India who can take those capabilities abroad and today actually drive South-South cooperation. So you have a country like India still at $3,000 per capita income, which actually has assistance programs in almost 80 countries in the world. And in some cases, these are billion-dollar programs where, what we have done in India, we have taken out of India to some other country. So to me, technology, self-reliance, multipolarity, South-South cooperation, they're part of one basket, and that is part of the response to what is happening, the point number one. Point number two, which we haven't spoken about today, this world which we are talking about will require a global workforce. Where that global workforce is to be housed and located may be a matter of a political debate. But there's no getting away. If you look at demand and you look at demographics, demands cannot be met in many countries purely out of national demographics. This is a reality. You cannot run away from this reality. So how do we create a more acceptable, contemporary, efficient model of a global workforce which is then located in a distributed global workplace? I think this is a very big question today, which the international economy has to address. The third point, and I would like to pick up on your optimism here, if you actually look at it, for all the imponderables, the uncertainties, eventually trade does find a way. And the fact is, it is easier to trade today. It is easier for physical reasons. There are better roads, better shipping, etc. It's easier for digital reasons. There are much smoother trade interfaces than there have ever been in human existence. So for all the obstacles and complications that may arise, I also think they will be countered in some ways or mitigated in some ways by what will happen, I think, in the trade domain. And finally, I agree with him. I think we will see, as part of this re-engineered world, I think we will see new, more different trade arrangements between countries, which will make decisions which they may not have made in other circumstances, countries which today will feel the desire sometimes even the compulsion to have new partners and new regions will look very much more. And certainly I can tell you where India is concerned. In many other regions, and that's one of the points we were discussing today, Latin America, Caribbean, where we actually do roughly about $45 billion of trade every year. But I can see with much greater effort, even what may be considered very distant regions today becoming much more relevant. So we are going to, technology-wise, trade-wise, connectivity-wise, workplace-wise, end up in a very different world in a very short time.
No, that's true. I was surprised when I learned during my visit to Mexico a year ago that literally all homes in Delhi get bread made by Mexican companies. I didn't know that, but it's true. A group in Mexico literally owns that, and every third Indian kitchen has Argentinian cooking oil. So very interesting that is Latin America that feeds us and of course also moves us. But Leslie.
I guess I would just pick up on two things. One is on this idea of, I guess there's a techno optimism perhaps on the panel, and I think I agree with the general premise and the call or the need for a global workforce. My caveat would be that I believe that the politics in more countries than not are working against what we need. Populism, nationalism, illiberal claims that are empirically wrong about immigration, about migrants, in too many countries are pushing in the wrong direction for those own people in those own countries and those own leaders. And that's not only at the low end, that's at the high end. Look at what's happening with the politics of H-1B visas in this country. It's absurd. And it's potentially catastrophic for some of the technological capabilities and movement forward that the U.S. needs, let alone the fact that it's just tremendously wonderful to have a diversified international, phenomenally intelligent workforce in the technology sector that comes from all over the world. We should have the best and the brightest. And that need and that desire and that ambition just doesn't square with the politics, with what's happening across many major research universities in the United States, potentially in the United Kingdom. If you look at the percentage of support for some of the Reform Party policies on immigration, it is very dangerous and potentially disastrous for what could otherwise be transformative potential of technology across many countries. And so I think that we have to be very aware of it, very realistic and honest about it, and work to change the narrative, to change the storyline, but also to produce policies that take the distributional consequences, which are very uneven, and address them and make sure that the benefits are delivered more equally. If we don't learn that lesson, we're not going to make the kind of progress that we absolutely need to make in the next few decades.
Look, I am going to end this panel on an optimistic note. I'm going to turn to Mr. Soleim. Mr. Soleim, please.
Technology is really the backbone of our business today. And there are many platforms, some we did and some existing. Like with India, for example, India Payment Innovation UPI is a very important system that can be adapted by the custom, and we adapted it today in UAE and Oman and many. We have a port community system, which is basically a platform where when someone wants to get his cargo out of the port, they go into this platform, and from there he will clear his customs, he'll pay the payment, and everything digital without even seeing an officer. In Dubai, we call it Dubai Trade. In India, we call it Bharat. In Africa, we call it Africa Trade. It's the same system. And we used it even in England, called CNS. A blockchain. Today, blockchain is a very important system because, I tell you, we have looked at a cost of a commodity, many commodities. We found out that just by using blockchain, people are paying 40% more than the real cost. So you look at the real cost, and blockchain give you two. things: encryption and transparency. And whatever is bill issued, nobody can change it. The supply chain is inefficient, and nobody wants to disrupt it, and we are trying to disrupt it now. And when we go to the trader and show them, they can't believe it. Another one is trace and track platform. We have our own, where it gives us an opportunity to actually get the customer ready to deal with it. Another one is called, is from the World Customs Organization. It's called Authorized Economic Operator. And this is very interesting, where basically even if a country doesn't have a bilateral trade, it is an agreement between two customs authorities.